Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. My name is Pierre Guislain. I'm the Director for Investment Climate in the World Bank Group. That's Bank, IFC, and MIGA. It's a pleasure to be chairing this session this morning. I'd like to first introduce my colleagues on the panel this morning. Mohamed Sharif to my left is the Director of BISCLIM, an EU-funded advisory program. Then to his left, we have Taz Anvaripur, who's Manager of Private Sector Development in the African Development Bank. And to her left, we have Michael Miebach, who is President, Middle East and Africa of MasterCard Worldwide. And then at the end of the podium here, we have Nader Moussavizadeh from Macro Advisory Partners, partner in that firm. So I think we have a great panel this morning. I'll start with a few words about what IFC and the World Bank Group are doing on the investment climate side in Africa. And I'll then turn to our panel members. We'll try to keep about 20 minutes for Q&A with the audience. First, I'd like to say one of the difficult things in investment climate reform, I would say, is that it's an essential but not necessary condition for investment, and it is one that is sometimes difficult to measure precisely. So we sometimes have difficulty with our clients in terms of pursuing the momentum because it's not always easy to see what it will lead to. Governments reform, they don't see investors coming the next day, they can lose some patience. So it's really important to get a dynamic going and sustain that dynamic. So the way I would look at it, if you look at what is driving investments in Africa and elsewhere, and what are the major drivers, clearly globalization remains, despite its slowdown, a major driver. We have clearly technology as a major driver of development, and one that I'd like to mention in terms of the political economy of reform is also the driver of benchmarking, of comparison, of my neighbor did this, maybe I need to get on the bandwagon as well and reform. And in that context, our Doing Business report, which you all are familiar with, is one of the examples of how that can get things moving. IFC and the World Bank are active on the investment climate side in, I would say, the majority of the 49 sub-Saharan African countries. At IFC, we have teams on the ground in 36 of these countries, including in 13 fragile and conflict-affected countries. Fragile and conflict-affected countries are a top priority for us because they are those that clearly need our help most, and stability and peace will require employment creation, jobs, etc., which is clearly, by and large, a private sector kind of business. Let me move now to, I mentioned globalization. One of the important things that has been a bit, one of the big challenges, I would say, in investment climate reform and in general in Africa is the fragmentation of markets. We have 49 economies, most of them quite small. These markets are clearly too small for most investors. And so regional integration and integration in the global economy are clearly important drivers on which much progress remains to be done. I'd like to mention some work we're doing with the East African community, which is probably one of the regional groupings in Africa that has advanced most in terms of aligning legislation and opening borders, etc. We're supporting the EAC on a series of reforms in the investment climate in the region, together with Trademark East Africa. And the reason I mentioned East Africa is to illustrate two specific examples that I'd like to mention briefly, those of Rwanda and Burundi. Why are Rwanda and Burundi reforming actively? They reform actively because they're small landlocked countries, they're small markets, and they know that their own stability, and you know events that happened there in past decades, their own stability requires better integration with their neighbors, requires access to markets, requires a more dynamic and vibrant economy. Rwanda is one of the leaders on investment climate reform in Africa. They have jumped tremendously in the Doing Business ranking. In the past 9 years, they have undertaken no less than 26 different reforms that have been tracked and measured by Doing Business report. What I'd like to emphasize on Rwanda is not so much their success on that score, which is well known, but the fact that the government has a broad investment climate reform strategy that is part of a broader regional integration strategy and macroeconomic strategy. And in terms of some of the examples of what we've been working with them on, this is a very specific example, might appear a bit narrow, but is absolutely essential for one of the key sectors of the economy. We've helped them implement reforms in the tea pricing mechanism, the green tea leaf pricing mechanism. And so that specific mechanism has, that change in the pricing scheme has now allowed small farmers to increase their earnings significantly. 60,000 tea farmers are now getting increased revenue because the different market mechanisms that has been put in place gives them a larger part of revenues from tea, and will also lead to a significant expansion in the tea production area. That's one example of how a country starting with what might seem in some cases as easier reforms is moving to reforms that fundamentally open up a specific sector of the economy, in this case, a reasonably important one. Burundi has been encouraged and stimulated, I would say, by the example of Rwanda and their neighbors, and they have a very dynamic second vice president who's been leading for the past couple of years a major investment climate reform program. Again, they started from pretty low in the Doing Business ranking, and they have been implementing some significant reforms that have helped them move up the ranking. A one-stop shop has led, for business registration, has led to doubling of the number of businesses registered. They've also established one-stop shops for property transfer, construction permits. They have also harmonized their corporate income taxation regime with the EAC regime, lowering corporate taxes from 35% to 30%. These two examples, framed by the EAC regional integration dimension, was the examples I want to provide here as one of many illustrations of important reforms that are taking place in Africa. And on this, I'd like to conclude my own introductory remarks and ask Sherif to share his views with us. Sherif? What struck me today is certainly one major theme that all speakers addressed. It's the importance of partnerships. And this may seem trite, it isn't. These are rather complex endeavors. It's kind of getting different partners to engage with one another in ways they may not have been used to work together before. So to me, that's an extremely important issue. It's partnerships and getting the private sector to kind of mobilize to help the government improve the business environment, the investment climate. Is partnerships to find solutions, technological solutions for example, payment systems, amongst other examples, and new solutions, creative ones that are not just adopting what the neighbor has done. Partnerships for financing also, where more and more we see that simply opening up a market may not be enough, and to unlock opportunities, you often need to create these partnerships that will give the private sector confidence, that will create the transition into a more open and dynamic market. So I think we all play a role in contributing to these partnerships. That's my really main takeaway. The second point is, again, through most of the comments we heard today, the importance of finding ways to integrate markets more effectively, to allow people to do business across country, to transfer money, to invest across borders, etc., to connect infrastructure from country to country. So I'd like to wrap up with these two themes that cut across the presentation. I would like to thank all the panelists for their excellent contributions. Et merci à vous, Excellence, d'avoir partagé avec nous ces propos sur le programme de réforme très important que vous menez au Sénégal et qui a l'appui de vos partenaires. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.